Tonight, a fight over the historic Voting Rights Act of 1965.
Some Atlanta faith leaders are voicing concerns of the Supreme Court ruling, but one top Georgia Republican is sharing a different message. Atlanta News First political reporter Doug Reardon is live at Big Bethel AME Church in Sweet Auburn. So, Doug, that was an important site in the fight for this historic law.
Yeah, it sure was the fight that got us the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And today, some of Atlanta's most prominent faith leaders gathered right out here in the Sweet Auburn neighborhood, just a couple of blocks away from the final resting place of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and expressed their concern that this Supreme Court decision could end up hurting the very communities that the Voting Rights Act was intended to help. The reaction was swift and clear from former Atlanta mayor and civil rights leader Andrew Young.
I think it's against the Constitution as I've read it for the last 250 years. But they read it different.
To Georgia Senator Raphael Warnock.
Today is a devastating day.
The Supreme Court's ruling against Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, allowing for congressional districts that favor minority voting blocs, could change the future makeup of Congress itself. On Tuesday, Atlanta's most prominent faith leaders stood outside Big Bethel AME Church in the historic Sweet Auburn neighborhood where the civil rights movement was birthed. Among them was the church's pastor, Dr. J. Augustine.
These are attempts to hide behind that which is legal, to discriminate, and to make sure that we do not have diverse voices in Congress.
Augustine says now that states can break apart the segments of minority voters that gave those groups power in numbers, diversity in Congress and at local levels of government is in jeopardy.
I have no doubt that they will take the license given by the gutting of Section 2 as another opportunity to push people to the margins. That is bad for democracy. That's bad for America.
While Governor Brian Kemp declined to call lawmakers back to Atlanta to redraw Georgia's maps, some in the legislature said that's exactly what needs to be done.
So it's time for Georgia and other southern states to remove these maps that we drew that were unconstitutional.
State Senator Greg Dolezal, a candidate for lieutenant governor, was one of them.
Well, I was happy to see that for the first time in modern history, we're not going to force states to draw maps based solely on race. And ultimately, I think that's what the civil rights movement was all about.
And of course, typically new legislative maps are only drawn every 10 years when the U.S. Census presents its data to the country. But because of a court order, a federal one at that, requiring more black districts in Georgia, ours were actually redrawn in 2023. Governor Brian Kemp, in his announcement not to call lawmakers back, said it shouldn't be done again until at least 2028, a full 2 years before it has to be done by law. We're in the Sweet Auburn neighborhood. Doug Reardon, Atlanta News First.